Welcome to the National Women's Fitness Academy podcast. We're here to talk about women's health, female hormones, body image, and all things health and fitness.
Hello, girls, and welcome back to another episode of the Women's Fitness Academy's podcast. I'm your host, Siggy, one of the WFA's educators and a women's mindset and body image coach. If you haven't done so, subscribe button to our podcast, so that way you don't miss out on another episode. And that helps us to spread the word around the world for more women who are interested in health and fitness, body image, mindset, lifestyle stuff. So make sure that you press pause, give us a subscribe, which obviously I would love seeing all of you around the world listening to this, and let us know what you think. With that being said, I'm chatting today with the lovely Jamie Mittleman. Jamie has a background in media and has managed a 30 million portfolio for Yahoo, AOL, and Verizon. Now, she's funded the Flame Bearers while studying Harvard and received awards for her impact. Now, Flame Bearers is a global platform celebrating women's Olympians and Paralympians, as well as sharing their stories through podcasts, videos, live events in 48 countries, and recently winning 4 Signal Awards for diversity, equity, inclusion, and public service activism. All the stuff going on. Jamie, I want to start by asking you, what is your personal connection to sport, and why did you start Flame Bearers?
Hey, Siggy, excited to be here from the opposite side of the world. And I totally hit that subscribe button before. So my connection to sport, growing up, sport was probably the highlight of my day. Like many people in your community, it's what I looked forward to. PE class. I was a 3-sport athlete in high school. I ended up playing soccer in college for a little bit. After school, I became a certified yoga instructor. Basically, some of my greatest moments, my highest highs, but also my lowest lows have come from sport. I think sport can be an incredible teacher and also a universal language. It's something that unifies people and brings people together. What's really funny about Flame Bearers is actually it was a COVID adaptation of a dream job. So this was not the plan. I had actually been pitching a communications and marketing role to the International Olympic Committee, and around their gender equity. They do a lot of gender equity, diversity, equity, inclusion work. And I said, I want to help you tell all of the world all of the awesome stuff you already do. This job doesn't exist, but, I think it should. And I'm the one who should make it happen. And then COVID happened and the Olympics and Paralympics were postponed. And I said, well, fine, I guess I'll just do this on my own. So I started Flame Bearers as a summer internship when I was at grad school, thinking I was just going to go back to school in the fall. But then we really gained some serious traction with people, and people said, wow, we haven't heard these stories before. Don't stop. And 3 years later, we're still doing the same thing. So kind of crazy. But it's what got me through COVID. And honestly, it's my why. It gets me up every morning.
It's so interesting how so many of us have started different roles or new careers during COVID.
Totally. Never in a million years, if you told me this, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, I probably would have laughed at you and said there's no chance. But here we are.
And so during your time during COVID and putting Flame Bearers together, what were some of the first steps to make this happen?
Yeah. So at first we had to do a lot of scoping. So what are we trying to do? Who are the athletes we want to work with? I think one of the earliest steps was deciding that we want to work with women only. So this is not an Olympian, Paralympian podcast, live event video company. We only work with women athletes. So deciding that, coming up with our brand promise, our values, our mission. And then also a very important step for us was being really intentional about including Paralympians in this as well. When you look at the media landscape around the Olympics and Paralympics, the last Paralympics, Tokyo 2021, was actually the first Paralympics in history that was ever shown on primetime television. So there's a massive divide in terms of media coverage when it comes to ability and disability. And I wanted to make sure that I, as an able-bodied person, that I was being an ally and raising the voices of people with physical disabilities. So that's why we included athletes with disabilities too. And, I am so grateful I did, because I think they have some of the coolest stories. Those are some badass women right there.
Well, I would actually love for you to share one of the stories from the Paralympics, because I do believe, as you mentioned before, it's not spoken openly or popular enough about these badass women.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this is probably the hardest question, because I feel like I'm always being asked to choose between my unborn children. I literally love every athlete that I get to work with. I think they're such models of courage and resilience and everything that I would want in a friend or a daughter one day. One person who I'd love to call out is Zara Nemati from Iran. She was the first female gold medalist in Iran's history. She was in an accident when she was a teenager, became wheelchair bound. She had actually been in martial arts earlier in her career and found archery as a way that she could become active again. This is someone who is in a wheelchair, but she uses her upper body for archery. And she fell in love with sport because she said it gave her freedom back. It made her feel like she was alive again. Flash forward to where she is today, and she is a cultural icon, literally the flag bearer for her country, ended up qualifying for the Olympics as well. So Paralympic and Olympian from Iran. And I think she's just an incredible role model and a testament to the resilience that so many Paralympic athletes have.
I think that's so wonderful to have more of an in-depth insight of some of these athletes' mindsets, especially for the Paralympians and our Olympians, because it takes a lot of resilience and hard work to go through what they do and do the training side of things. And I would love to know, what are some things that differentiate between Olympians and Paralympians?
Yeah, it's such a good question. I wish I could say that there are very clear differences. I think that there's a lot more things that they have in common than that are actually different. I think, well, the first thing that's probably really obvious is that most people don't really understand the difference between the Olympics or the Paralympics, and there's some confusion with the Special Olympics. So just to throw it out there, the Paralympics literally means parallel to or side by side of the Olympics. It's for people with physical disabilities, which is different than the Special Olympics, which is for mental disability or cognitive disability. So that's actually led by a completely different organization. It's the International Olympic and Paralympic Committee, which is in charge of the Olympics and the Paralympics. So I think that's kind of one important thing to throw out there. One thing I would also say that in my experience having worked with them is that a lot of Paralympians think very differently about disability. Because some of them really identify with that term and others do not. Some of them don't even use that word. They use able, but some people say, I am a person of different abilities, or I've heard so many different ways that they phrase it, that they think of themselves, versus everyone in the Olympics, for the most part, considers themselves an able-bodied person, and the conversation around ability does not come up. So that's one key difference. And I think one difference that's also comes along with that is how people portray Olympians versus Paralympians, which kind of gets to the heart of what we do, is telling people's stories how they want them told. what a lot of Paralympians are often portrayed with kind of a pity brush. People often portray them, oh, I feel so bad for them because of A, B, and C, when oftentimes that's not a narrative that actually resonates with the athletes themselves. So I think that's just one word of caution I'd throw out to people. Having worked with quite a few Paralympians, just to be mindful of what story they actually want told about themselves versus the narrative that we're used to hearing about people of different abilities.
It's such an important message to give across to people. And as you said, too often it's not the narrative that the Paralympians are going through. Like, yes, they may be identified as someone who, doesn't have all four limbs like, an Olympian, but then yet they can still function their everyday lifestyle without it as well.
Exactly. I worked with Nikki Nieves. She's a sitting volleyball player. So what that is the Paralympic equivalent of volleyball, the traditional volleyball that most people have come to know. Nikki played able-bodied volleyball in college, but she does not have a hand. She's one-handed. And so she is on the Paralympic team. She's won a gold medal. And it's interesting. She's very outspoken about this because oftentimes, people kind of co-opt her story and the story of many fellow athletes with disabilities, and it doesn't really resonate with all of them. For some, it totally does, but just something that I think is important to make sure that we're being intentional about.
Mm-hmm. I want us to go back to the start of you coming up with the flame bearers. What is the difference what difference is flame bearers making right now that is coming across the world and the media?
Yeah, sure. So at the time that I launched this, the world was getting, the statistic that was commonly cited was under 4% of sports media coverage was going to women athletes globally. So that means that historically 96% of sports media coverage was historically going to male athletes. Wasserman and the Collective just published a report that came out saying in the last 4 years in particular, there has been a massive increase, and that number is now up to 15%. So that still means 85% of overall sports media coverage goes to male athletes, but 15% is a lot better than 4%. I'd like to think that we've been playing a small part of that. I think the area where we're really making a difference is not in the sports reporting, but in the storytelling part. So we are not telling people the scores of games. We are not talking about the upcoming matchup in A, B, or C tournament. What we do, though, is we tell the athletes' stories so people now know who X, Y, or Z athlete from A, B, and C continent are, and they're hopefully going to tune in to support them. And I think that matters because as women's sports and women's fitness continues to grow, I think storytelling is one of the best ways to get people to care and to get them to connect to people themselves.
You made such a good point in terms of why you're doing this is obviously to bring out more stories of women Olympians and Paralympians out. But why would you say it is important aside from the statistics side of things?
I think it's really hard to be what you can't see. I remember when I was a little girl and looking up to Mia Hamm, who's a professional soccer player, or Christine Lilly or Brandy Chastain, and I'm from the United States. So these are women soccer players from my country, and seeing them play on the television. And I said, hey, I look like them. I sound like them. I can do that too. And beyond the statistics, beyond the numbers, I think it matters for girls from all corners of the world to have role models who look and sound like them, doing activities like sports that they love at the highest levels. So they can say, you know what, if they got a gold medal, I'm not quitting. I worked with the first woman from Madagascar. So this is a Black woman who's an alpine skier. And she told me she's really driven because she wants people to see her as a Black woman in skiing and know that Black women can ski. And she was very opinionated about that because she says she wants Malagasy women to know that they too can get on the slopes. So I just think it speaks to the power of role modelship.
100%. And I love so much about that. And you made such a good point as being, someone who's looking up to other women. And this is the type of role models we're wanting for other women. It's not necessarily just about physiques and looks. It's like the capabilities of what we're actually able to do.
100%. It's yes. Of course, you see someone in a magazine and you see what they look like, but then you hear them talk and you hear what they care about. I mean, we try to show that these are multidimensional women who have highs and lows, and many of them go through depression after the Olympics or the Paralympics, or they have a kid and they have postpartum depression. What is that like? No one is talking about that. We did a whole podcast season on what happens after the Olympics and the Paralympics, when the fans go home, when the cameras aren't there. And you have 4 years to have a baby. If you want to have a baby, you better have it as soon as those games are over, because then you got to get back into training. So those are the conversations that we like to have. And I think it's really humanizing because we're creating a space for women to feel safe and comfortable, sharing what they share with their teammates, but with other women athletes around the world.
It's so important for people to understand the message behind these athletes. And I love the fact that you've opened up about the reality of these Olympians and Paralympians post competitions and post the Olympics, because too often it's like us, watching a soccer game and barracking for the team that has won, but we don't actually see what happens behind scenes, post-show, post-game. So I would love for you to highlight some of the things that goes through the athletes' minds post-Olympics or post-competitions.
Sure. So one athlete I will specifically name, I saw you've done a lot of work with postpartum with your organization. So Deja Young is another Paralympian. She's a track and field star. She has a gold medal. She recently had a child, and she was talking about postpartum depression. She's also been very open about mental health and her earlier attempt at her life, and essentially how this was a really challenging time for her after the Tokyo Paralympics, that, things were a little different. She had a baby and she was struggling, and she was trying to think about what she should do with her career. And she ended up retiring, and she now has a beautiful baby. But I think it's really hard for someone who's had so much success to be so vulnerable. Because people look up to her, because she's literally an international champion, to be able to share that so openly. And yet at the same time, as a Paralympian, and a Black woman, talk about how no one has ever tried to sponsor her. So how, from a financial perspective, how, there's been a lot of issues that have been really challenging as well.
And as you mentioned, because people look up to her, that vulnerability takes it just to the next level.
Exactly. This is someone who she literally told me when I interviewed her, she's like, if anyone is listening to this and you're having a bad day, slide into my DMs and I will respond to you. So her name is Deja Young Craddock now, if anyone's listening. She has a heart of gold and she will get back to you in a second.
I love that. And I really respect that, because too often people are very worried about being vulnerable or open and honest because of other people's judgments or their opinions.
Exactly. And her takeaway, what she said was, she hopes that through sharing her story, that maybe she'll be able to reach one person and help them not go through what she did. So yes, I think it is really scary. I think she's more scared of the possibility of someone experiencing what she did than any potential fears of judgment.
That is so powerful. I do want to ask you who have some of your favorite guests been and why?
Okay. I'm gonna go. Can I do two? Is that allowed?
Yeah.
Great. Let's go with Masuma Alizada. So Masuma's on the Olympic refugee team. So a lot of people were not familiar. I didn't know this before I started this work, that there is an Olympic refugee team. So this takes in athletes from war-torn countries who would not otherwise have the ability to participate in the Olympics. Masuma is born and raised in Afghanistan. She is an incredible cyclist, and her family was targeted by the Taliban because she is a cyclist. So she shared her story about growing up and having to dress up as a man in order to go bike riding. And when she was bike riding, dressed up as a man, she could not just go out on her own. She would have to go out with a man in front of her and a man behind her. And then when cars were passing her, if anyone ever realized that she was actually a woman, which often happened, they would yell at her, they would throw stuff at her, and actually she was hit a number of times, which is just absolutely wild to me. It reminded me of the privilege that I have, that I think oftentimes I know that I forget, of living in a place where the ability to exercise is not something that everyone has all around the world. So Masuma is currently living in France, and she represented the refugee team in Tokyo. And she actually just did the recent Tour de France this past summer, which was her childhood dream. So I'm looking forward to supporting her in Paris this upcoming summer. But I think she's just an incredible role model for other people in her country. She says she wants to keep biking, so to give hope to women in Afghanistan. And yeah, she's pretty cool. Another one, oh gosh, this is so hard. Let's go with Rita Asimwe. Rita is from Uganda, and she lost her right hand when she was, I believe, in 4th grade, when thieves broke into her grandma's home. So she was at her grandma's house. Thieves broke into her grandma's home. She distracted the thieves. They were going towards the room with her grandma and her family. She distracted them. They chased after her. They ended up catching her, and they hacked off her hand, her right hand. She was a righty, with a machete. Woke up. She thought she was going to die. Woke up. Her arm was gone. Essentially relearned how to do everything in her life with her left hand. She went back to school and adamantly told anyone she did not want anyone feeling bad for her. She was, quote, the same old Rita. And she's very, very firm on that. And she's now the #1 para-badminton player in all of Africa. She is on her way to Paris, hopefully. She is a feat of nature. And this just, again, an incredible role model of resiliency, who something happened to her and she made the most amazing comeback and was not going to let that change how she was going to live every day.
Wow. I'm actually speechless about both stories, because the first story was the fact that not everyone has the privilege of exercising as much as, certain people do around the world. And the fact that she had to hide her sex to actually be cycling in the streets. And like you mentioned, if she was found, she would either get hurt or thrown things out, which literally just baffles me. And the fact that this still happens around the world till this day, and many people are not aware of it, and now they have the awareness of us talking about it. And the second story of Rita, again, it reflects back on how strong people's mindset can be around certain incidents or accidents. Again, everyone has the choice of whether you're going to go that one pathway or the other pathway. And from the stories that you've been explaining, they literally don't identify themselves as a victim mentality of not having a a certain limb and they're just like, I'm just going to do the best I can. And I'm just going to fucking go for it.
That's exactly right. That is one of the common traits that I would say across any Paralympian, anyone at that elite level. I have never talked to anyone who they've gone through periods 100% where they have mourned, a limb if they were not born that way, if it was an accident that caused that. Yes. And many of them have been very, very vulnerable in sharing that story and not hiding that they woke up the next day and they were totally fine. Many of them went through periods of depression where they thought their life as they knew it was going to end. But to your point, many of them have come out the other side and are going to say, okay, this happened to me. I do not identify with the victim label. What is the life I want to live? And they run towards that full steam ahead.
And that is so powerful. And it just testifies to you that no matter what happens, you always have the choice to move past it and choose a different and a better style of thinking.
I think so too. They honestly, I mentioned this before, but these ladies literally got me through COVID when everyone, in my friend group, in my community was struggling, was feeling alone. Here are women who are getting up and busting their butts every single day, not even knowing if the Olympics and Paralympics were gonna happen. They didn't even know then. And yet they got up and did it every single day.
Yeah. Kudos to these women, I swear. Like, yeah. Such really inspirational role models. And what I've noticed as well, you're working with international athletes, not just those who are based in the US. Now, given the language and culture barriers, how do you approach your work with these international athletes?
Sure. This was really important to me. So backstory, I'm an international affairs undergrad major. I've lived abroad a number of times. And I think for women in particular, there's a real opportunity of global sisterhood. I think we are more similar than we are different. And I think I'm hoping that we are at a turning point in the world where we can all come together to support each other. So it was really important to me to not just work with women who look and sound like me, but to support women literally on the opposite side of the world who I know nothing about their religion. I cannot speak their language, but I can learn from them and they can teach me things. In terms of how I go about it, it's hard. It would be a lot easier for me to just source athletes from this country, 100%. That said, I think the upside is so much greater. So what we do, oftentimes I have someone, I actually work with translators for athletes from countries that I don't speak, and I have translators reach out on our behalf. And then if they do not speak English, we conduct interviews in their normal languages as well. And the reason that's important is we want them to share their story as they want it told. Again, we really view ourselves as kind of the amplifiers. We're not, co-opting or taking their stories and putting it into a mold, but we want them to be comfortable sharing it in the words of their mom and what they're comfortable and what they talk at home.
That's so powerful. I'm wondering now, how many translators do you have?
Well, depends on who we're working with. So usually I kind of I look at my friends and I'm like, okay, guys, who knows this language? Or it's like, do you know anyone who speaks this? And it's kind of a momentary scramble. So if anyone's listening to this and speaks some language and is like, you know what, Jamie, you haven't worked with an athlete from this country, holler.
Well, hopefully they do approach, because I'm sure this is going to be televised internationally. So hopefully someone comes around and goes, hey, I speak this, let me help you.
Would love that. Yes, please.
What are the big plans before the next Olympics?
So we are doing a whole video and podcast series, excuse me, on women who are seeking to qualify for Paris or who are already qualified. So we have a slate of, I think we're up to 20 athletes now from around the world who are on their way to Paris, some of whose ticket is already punched, others who are literally getting up day in and day out, still busting their butts, trying to secure that ticket. So we're in the process of just starting to record those interviews. We're actually going to Paris. We have a number of in-person and virtual events also lined up, telling their stories in different ways. And then we are working on some exciting video work, but I can't quite announce that yet. So stay tuned. Exciting stuff to come.
This is so exciting. Is this going to be your first time at the Olympics since bringing up Flame Bears?
So I actually had the chance to go in Tokyo, which was absolutely bizarre because that was the games that no one was at during COVID. But this will be the first one that will have fans. So I'm very excited to see what that's like.
Oh my God, it's going to be so cool. Jamie, thank you so much for joining me today. It's been such an eye-opener. Like, I know I've learned a lot from you today, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners have had a better understanding of the differences between Olympians, Paralympians, the Special Olympics, like what goes behind scenes. And it just shows you that too often whatever we perceive as real is just a highlight on the TV or social media. You don't actually see the back end story of the athletes.
I think that's right. And I mean, honestly, the athletes get all the credit. I hope that they know that they are the stars of this show, and it's really an honor that they trust us to tell their stories. That's not a responsibility we take lightly. So thank you for having me, Siggy. This has been great.
It's been so good. Well, girls, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please make sure that you screenshot it, tag us at the Women's Fitness Academy. And then till next time, let's support one another and bring that sisterhood as one.